Hello and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, senior diplomats from China and ASEAN nations are in Vietnam, where they will discuss various disputes in the South China Sea. Can they find consensus? And as bidding continues for this year's charity auction lunch with Warren Buffett, we'll examine the role of philanthropy. We begin today's show with the South China Sea, the 12th senior officials meeting on the implementation of the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, or it's called the DOC, were held in Vietnam's Ha Long City on Thursday. Senior diplomats from China and ASEAN member states attended the meeting. The Chinese delegation was led by Vice Foreign Minister Liu Zhenmin. The routine meeting is part of the ongoing efforts to draw up a code of conduct for the South China Sea under the framework of DOC implementation. China and ASEAN members have exchanged views on comprehensive and effective implementation of the DOC. On Wednesday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has released a statement regarding the South China Sea, saying it adheres to the solemn position of non-acceptance of and also non-participation in the unilateral arbitration initiated by the Philippines. Foreign Ministry spokesman Hong Lei called for Manila to settle disputes through bilateral negotiations. CCTV's Roy Rottenberg reports.
China says the Philippines is going against its own word, namely a previous deal signed more than 20 years ago, which included a proposal for regular talks between the two countries to resolve maritime issues. Manila has instead taken its case to The Hague, unilaterally initiating arbitration. Beijing says the action contradicts UN conventions governing the law of the sea. On Wednesday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry, though, said it remains committed to talks.
The door is always open for dialogue between China and the Philippines to resolve the South China Sea issue through negotiation. China remains committed to settling disputes with the Philippines through negotiation, respecting historical facts and in accordance with international law.
A ruling is still weeks away, and for the most part, Beijing has ignored the proceedings. More than $5 trillion in shipping trade passes through the South China Sea each year. A number of countries have claims to the waters and also close military alliances with the U.S., which has often angered China by conducting reconnaissance missions in the South China Sea and in the East China Sea. This week, American defense officials in the Pacific said one of their aircraft, an RC-135, was on a routine patrol in what the U.S. calls international airspace over the East China Sea, when two Chinese jets approached, one of them traveling at, quote, an unsafe excessive rate of closure on the American aircraft. China has repeatedly warned the U.S. against what it says are spying missions in the region. On Wednesday, Beijing demanded the activities be stopped.
The root cause of the issue is the frequent close reconnaissance over Chinese waters and in China's airspace by U.S. military aircraft. That has seriously threatened Chinese maritime and airspace security. China has the right to take defensive measures.
For more on the latest regarding the South China Sea, I'm joined here in the Beijing studio, Professor Zhu Chenghu, who is a Chinese military expert retired from the National Defense University here in this country. Welcome, General Zhu. And also in our Beijing studio, we're having Professor Ye Hailin, who is a researcher with the National Institute of International Strategies with Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, or CAS. Welcome as well. So, first of all, how much can we expect from this 12th senior official going right now between China and some of the ASEAN member foreign ministries?
I think this conference itself is focusing on the DOC. It's already verified the importance of this meeting, because we know the DOC is quite important for the South China Sea dispute. And this meeting re-emphasized and recognized the importance and the commitment made by 12 years ago. So I think this means a lot. It means that China and the ASEAN countries still will follow the correct track of the DOC and try to work together to solve this issue.
DOC, of course, is the abbreviation form for
Sure.
Code of Conduct. But how much would this specific set of Code of Conduct be helpful in resolving now the territorial disputes in the South China Sea?
Let's go back to the text of the DOC. There's a two issues we should mention. One is means that all the parties recognize there are only the peaceful solution for the dispute. And secondly, the peaceful solution means bilateral contact and bilateral negotiation. So re-emphasize and recognize the importance and the commitment of the DOC means they will go back to the right track. At least this is the commitment recently made by the ASEAN and China again.
But others would argue, General Zhu, that yes, the DOC was in fact being negotiated among countries, for example, between China and ASEAN members, but still we see territorial disputes continue and being heightened over the past few years. So they would argue whether DOC is a really meaningful way of resolving the differences. Should we look for other ways, for example, going to the international arbitration, some would argue?
No, I think DOC is very important for China and all those countries which have claims over the sovereignty of the territory in South China Sea. Because if you, as Mr. Professor Yi mentioned just now, some countries are actually against their DOC, for example, the Philippines. So this issue should be addressed by negotiation on in the framework of bilateral talks. So while Philippines go to the international court for the arbitration unilaterally, so this is action itself is an act which betrays the DOC, which has been consensus reached between China and 10 members of ASEAN.
That also seems to be the statement coming from the Chinese Foreign Ministry on Wednesday. In fact, on Wednesday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry issued a statement on China Sea disputes between China and the Philippines. Take a look at this. The statement says China has always stood for settling territorial and maritime delimitation disputes through negotiation with states directly concerned and always on the basis of respecting historical facts and in accordance with international law. There is the quote over there on our screen. But the question is, Professor Ye, that is China's opinion. The Philippines does not believe so.
Actually,
so you have some very interesting issue here. So China wants to go into direct negotiation, one with the other. But the Philippines are saying, well, this might not work. So we want to go to so-called international court to settle this. So you have the two sides of the disputes do not necessarily agree at all about the means to settle the disputes. So there's no way, it seems, that we are going to see the end of this dispute because no one is agreeing with one another about how to resolve.
But firstly, we should notice that it's not an international court, it's an arbitral tribunal. It's not a court, it's only the tribunal. So this means it's even not a court, it's only a discussion forum for Philippines to raise this issue. There's no any jurisdiction over this.
Yes, that's said, but still, you got two different ways.
It's not only the Chinese stance, it's also the Philippine stance. In 2011, both countries, they have a statement issued by two presidents and claim that the two countries, I mean China and the Philippines, not the China and the ASEAN, will go to the bilateral contact to solve the problem. So it's not a Chinese stance only for the bilateral contacts. It's also the Philippines' commitment. So we should say it's the Philippines themselves, they betrayed their commitment and try to find another way. And this way, we can say from the 2011 till now, it's only 5 years. But start the negotiation of the DOC to all the parties signed the DOC take the 11 years. So how we can say Philippine side is we already tried our best and now this way is no way out. So we should go another way.
But actually, we had a very successful experience in the settlement of the disputes in Bay of Talking between China and Vietnam. So this example could be taken and be used in a settlement of the disputes over Spratly Islands.
All right, but for now, the Philippines are already going to the international arbitration. Whether you argue it is a temporary or not, it is, but still, they regard it as the way out. So if the international arbitration is coming out with its so-called decisions, what will be the two sides of this dispute, China and the Philippines, are going to do as a result of this? China can just discard it and say, well, we are not participating, we are not listening to whatever your decisions are because we don't think it's legitimate.
I think that China is not only disregard such kind of the solution, China will take the action to against such kind of the solution.
What is the action? Here I want to ask the General Zhu, because one of the things people talk a lot about this tension in the South China Sea is everyone is concerned about any possibility of military conflict. We're not talking about wars here. We're just talking about conflict. Conflict could be small scale, could be with a clash of 1 second and yet evolved into something much bigger than everybody could expect. So, General Zhu, what is the bottom line for China? You're coming from the military side, even though you're a retired general, but still, from the Chinese military side, what?
I think here I'm quite confident that no country would like to fight against each other in South China Sea unless China is willing to fight, because the other countries are much smaller and much weaker than China in the military capabilities. Of course, I don't think we Chinese would have to would want to see a conflict between China and other countries on the territory in South China Sea or especially in Spratly Islands. It is because it's not in the interests of any country in this region. But if other countries like the Philippines continue to provoke against China, I'm really wondering this sort of provocations will trigger a conflict between China and the Philippines.
It is not just China and the Philippines. We've also seen some what some consider as quite dangerous cases over the past few weeks. For example, even between China and the United States. The United States is doing so-called patrolling in the territories that China claims, or near the territories that China claims. And there was earlier complaints coming from the US side or coming from the Chinese side, talking about there has been some very close encounter of the patrolling ship of the US and also their Chinese counterpart. So, even though we understand China has the legal means of claiming the territory and also send out its own version of the patrolling trips to make sure it is its own territory, but still, such a close encounter could mean a possibility of a crisis, even though it could be small scale. So, General Zhu, once again, are the two sides, or sides, various sides, sophisticated enough to be able to make sure that they are doing exactly, concisely, and precisely what they should do?
Actually, I'm pretty much concerned about those sort of actions taken by the U.S. military. Following the collision in the area over Hainan in 2001, I think the two militaries have negotiated a lot and established some mechanisms to prevent the occurrence of this sort of incident and in managing the crisis between the two sides. And two sides set a lot of rules. For example, the two military aircraft, if they encounter in the air, I mean the public area instead of territorial area, so they will have to keep a distance, which is closely stipulated, that is about 500 meters away.
Right.
And if the two military vessels are encounter on the sea, I mean the high sea special, maybe in EEZ,
Right.
and they have to keep a distance, which could be enough to avoid this sort of incident. But nowadays, I think this doesn't include the territorial water. If the American vessels intrude into the territorial water, I think the Chinese military can take any action. So I'm pretty much concerned about the occurrence of the new crisis if the Americans continue to provoke against China in this way.
But are we going to see big possibilities of what General Zhu just mentioned, whether from Chinese perspective is coming from the United States or coming from the Philippines, and what would that mean for China's next step of decisions?
I think for China should clearly realize to maintain the peace is not only the unilateral obligation of China. It's need two sides make the common effect. But in the matter of fact, we never heard the United States military mechanisms clear that in any stance, any condition, America will avoid the military contact with China. So it's really difficult for China to say, okay, this is our obligation, it's our job to prevent any military conflict to maintain the peace. I don't think this is our obligation. It's only our expectation. But you could have the very high expectation, but you have to make the very worst preparation for any potential conflict.
Is China prepared for the worst?
Yes, of course.
General Zhu?
Yes, especially the military. They have to be prepared for the worst. Otherwise, it's impossible for us to keep peace and stability.
On the other hand, as just you said, Professor Ye, this issue about territorial disputes in the South China Sea has become such a big one over the past few months, if not years. Not only here in China, but also in some of the other countries who claim to have a conflict with China when it comes to sovereignty. So this has become such a big chunk of the internal political debates inside many countries. How dangerous is that? Especially at a time when you see the United States is going through its own season of political change, its presidential campaign going on, when you see China, of course, and also some of the ASEAN member countries in this way, specifically the Philippines, they're also having change of political leadership. So what would this very intense debate internationally or regionally about territorial disputes mean for domestic politics, and as a result, the other way around?
Clearly, actually, in the United States, the South China Sea dispute is not a hot topic on the presidential election. It's only one of the issues. For China, it's a second-level issue. Actually, we have the fully confident that we are capable and we have enough patience to solve this problem, and suitable for our interest, also to maintain the regional peaceability. And we should notice that even for Philippines, they openly argued for many times, but still they have some internal debate. So that means it's only try to drive the South China Sea dispute from the dispute into the conflicts. It's not welcomed by any country in this region. So it's the internal debate also verified actually the importance of the regional cooperation, and also verified the Chinese stance. I mean, seeking for the peaceful long-term resolve is our common interest.
And General Zhu, let me just be frank here. It is no secret in any country that we have debates between the military and the civilian side about the actions to be taken regarding certain hotspot issues. And of course in China as well. So what would that mean, this continued debate regionally between China, for example, and the Philippines, mean for China's internal debate between the military and some of the other policymakers from the other different walks of life when it comes to what should be China's bottom line and what actions to be taken, what are some of the crisis management plan? General Zhu, I would like to ask for your advice.
I think the bottom line of the Chinese side is to protect the sovereignty and territorial integrity. This is very important. Of course, we have very controversial views on how to protect the sovereignty and the territorial integrity. For example, some people would advocate to address the issue through negotiation and through diplomatic channel, while many people are criticizing the Chinese government and the military for their weakness, for their unwillingness. They believe they are unwilling to war against their countries. They are. The Philippines is so weak. Why don't you fight against it and recapture those islands occupied by the Philippine side? So I think the internal and the external factors may interact upon each other. Sometimes the nationalism is rising all over those countries around China.
Here is the thing then, as a result, how to manage and put under control these kinds of different kind of rhetorics, not only here in China, but also elsewhere as well. that is something that really worth thinking, isn't it? I mean, over the past few days, we've seen a successful round of the China-U.S. strategic and economic dialogue, and both sides believe some of the hotspot issues should be managed with certain kind of degree so that it will not being spelled out of control or beyond its proportion of significance. So, Professor Ye, what do you make of this? Is this the right time to do it? Can we have the wisdom, all countries involved, be able to do it?
I think it's not only related to the wisdom or not. It's also about the moment, the right time. Frankly speaking, now it's not because of we are so stupid that we can't find a way out. It's because of all the parties think we can hold on this issue to waiting for the better moment. Better moment means when the environment, the circumstances are better for us, we can make this situation, the resolution is on our side. So that's the key issue.
On our side, meaning Chinese side, or
no.
Different sides
Even
regarding
China,
as the best time?
So we can notice that only the Philippines, they are so eager to solve the problem because they know they don't have the better moment. But China and the U.S., they also say they all have the very confidence that even the time passing by, we still can hold the issue, make the issue to follow our interests. So that's it. We can share this. So that means now it's only the manage. Manage doesn't mean you prepare the condition for the future resolvement. It's not only for this. It also means we are prepared for the future conflicts. Manage is only the neutral word. It doesn't mean manage is the first step of the resolve.
All right. What about messages coming from you, General Zhu? What do you think? How can all sides be able to exercise what they consider as wisdom and also make sure that things could happen at least to protect their own national interest and also for the best of the region as they see it?
Yeah, I think the best way is to sit down and sit on the negotiation table and negotiate and talk with each other and make each position clearly to the other side. And I believe through these sort of exchanges we can find ways to address this sort of issue. But I think there is one important thing for all sides. One is that they have to restrain themselves from provoking against the other side. Second, the countries concerned, when they start negotiation, they should try to make compromises to each other. So this is the best way.
All right. And before we go, one final question for you, Professor Ye, very briefly if you can. We've seen countries from different parts of the world, whether it is their media, different kinds of media organizations, or even national governments or foreign ministries of various countries come out with different kind of statements expressing their views in this dispute regarding China and, for example, the Philippines. What are we seeing right now? Many people are wondering, what kind of nature is this? Is this going to become from a regional debate and spilling into an international one about which side you're on, and what would that mean?
Based on my own personal experience, it's a far way to turn into the issue from the local or the regional topic into the international one. It's still a long way to go. And actually, most of the other countries, they don't have the very special interest and the special stance on the South China Sea dispute. They prefer the peace, but they don't have any affiliate to any side.
Actually, the outsiders' involvement is not conducive at all to the peace and the stability in this region and to the settlement of the disputes over the territory.
I see. We'll see how things would evolve. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us and expressing your own perspectives. General Zhu Chenghu and also Professor Ye Hailin. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you. Stay with us here on World Insight. We've got our final segment coming right up. Bidding has slowed for this year's charity auction lunch with Warren Buffett. What is the significance of philanthropy in an evolving world? Will this lunch reflect that? Welcome back. You're watching World Insight on CCTV News. How much would you pay to have lunch with investing guru Warren Buffett? Since 2000, the billionaire has hosted an annual lunch. Bids for the exclusive lunch have stayed high, even though Buffett is arguably quite accessible to the public. All money will go to Glide, a charity group in San Francisco. We will discuss this model of fundraising later, but first, let's take a look at this backgrounder.
3, 2, 1.
Beyond a Meal. The annual charity auction for a private lunch with billionaire investor Warren Buffett is underway. The winner and up to 7 friends can dine with Buffett at the Smith & Wollensky Steakhouse in Manhattan. As of 10 o'clock GMT Thursday, the top bid to dine with the chairman of the conglomerate Berkshire Hathaway Inc. was $230,300. It will likely surge by the time the eBay auction ends on Friday night. Winning bids have reached 7 figures every year since 2008, with the record $3,456,789 offer submitted anonymously in 2012. Last year's winner paid $2,345,678. Auction proceeds go to Glide, a charity in San Francisco's Tenderloin district that provides food, health care, and other services to people who are homeless, poor, or struggling with substance abuse. Buffett has raised about $20.2 million in 16 auctions for Glide.
It's a wonderful event, and we're very grateful to Mr. Buffett for his generosity. He's sharing his heart, is what he's doing, because he cares about the people that we serve.
Buffett is the world's 3rd richest person, worth $66.8 billion, according to Forbes magazine on Monday. He is donating virtually all of his wealth to charity. The philanthropist said in a statement that he's proud to be part of something that has directly benefited so many people in need. Warren Buffett has come to China several times to promote the Giving Pledge campaign, initiated in conjunction with Bill Gates. Though the Chinese economy has grown rapidly these years, wealth and giving have not increased in tandem. China comes a dismal 144th out of 145 in the Charities Aid Foundation's 2015 World Giving Index. While per capita rates of giving remain a fraction of the levels seen in the West, absolute amounts are rising. Some experts predict that Chinese people will soon be giving more money away than nationals of any other country except the U.S. But the future of Chinese philanthropy is almost entirely in the hands of the younger generation.
Well, for more discussion on that topic, we're joined here in the Beijing studio, Professor Liu Baocheng, the Dean of Center for International Business Ethics with the University of International Business and Economics. Welcome, sir. And also joining us from Washington, D.C., we're having Professor Christopher Chambers, Professor of Journalism with Georgetown University. Welcome as well. So, Professor Liu, how much would you like to pay if you got money, the cash in hand, to have a lunch with Mr. Buffett?
Well, I would rather donate and save the lunch money, and donate more to those, needy ones. Yes.
So, what would you make of this way? Of course, this is not just about the lunch. It is more about the publicity, and it's also about the publicity from Mr. Buffett himself to indicate to the general public that there has to be some moments attention should be given to philanthropy.
That's right. I think seriously, what is the motivation behind it? Are you really doing business for this type of lunch with Buffett, or are you really there to contribute to philanthropy through the innovative way of doing the charity work by Buffett? So that's a different story. So the other is that, people wanted to get exposure, but in the meantime, they want to also learn knowledge, experience, and skills as how to make more money as to benchmark with Buffett. But in the meantime, I think they also learn the innovative way of doing charity work. So I think,
Right.
So Buffett has been very creative and very effective in soliciting money between, from the rich and help those poor.
Right. And Professor Chambers, I mean, Mr. Buffett's lunch auction has been going on for quite a number of years. At the very beginning, there's a lot of eyeballs and attention. Over the years, the attention span seems to be a little bit escaping. Is this still going to attract enough attention? And is this still the most effective way to advocate the idea of philanthropy?
It's not the most effective way, but it does focus some media attention and some attention from the general public in the United States and in places like China. What's happened is that Warren Buffett has gotten to be almost an elder statesman in American business, while some of the wealthier people, some of the wealthier organizations, some of the corporations have kind of moved away from that central older male figure. So it's almost like he's become a legend, and I guess the luncheon has become a victim of its own success, where people kind of look at it as a given and something great and wonderful, but people have moved on to a different model. And I think that that's the thing that probably China needs to look at is wealthy individuals like Warren Buffett, people in China who are wealthy, who can zero in on certain needs the way Bill Gates has done, for example, and other wealthy individuals in the United States in arranging foundations and other mechanisms to assist people. And I think that when you, now that you have a pretty comprehensive Chinese charity law that it's increased the efficiency and the trust of the public, I think this is a perfect opportunity to put all that into place.
Professor Liu, of course, since Professor Chambers talked about the charity law, many would point out there have been a lot of differences between doing philanthropic work here in China when it comes to legal framework and also elsewhere in the world, for example, in the United States. China just started off making sure there could be sufficient legal framework out there. So is what they have elsewhere, for example, just like Mr. Gates with his Gates Foundation, or Mr. Buffett, Mr. Gates, the Giving Pledge, or Mr. Buffett's so-called lunch auction, will these models work for Chinese philanthropists?
I think it's going to work because China is very good at circle culture, so they can really formulate a sort of circle. And the other is that it is really a platform to communicate ideas not only within the circle but also to the rest of the world, given that because eBay is really offering this type of platform now, both the mass media, macro media can really help to disseminate those information, and this can also set a sort of showcase, an exemplary case for the general public as what they can do. It is not really, donating money, but also volunteer in the work, right, and to help strangers. They're also part of the philanthropy work.
Well, indeed, may contribute the growth of philanthropy to wealth accumulations in China. According to the Forbes, China has 335 billionaires accounting in US dollars. The China Philanthropic Project with Harvard University also said since August of 2015, 100 top Chinese philanthropists donated around 3.8 billion US dollars in total. That's of course in donation. And the localization is one significant character. 60% of the donation went to the provinces, accommodating the headquarters of donators' companies. So those are some of the numbers we are seeing right now. But will that, to your satisfaction, Professor Liu, because you've been doing business ethics in China for quite a long time. At the very beginning, I understand was very difficult, even for people to understand what you're talking about. And now, are you reaching your golden age in terms of others' acceptance to the and also their acceptance and willingness to contribute to philanthropy?
Well, I think now the number one, philanthropy is really dependent on the wealth accumulation. It's not only among the rich people, but also among the general people on the street. And we are really positive for at least, since 2008. The Chinese drive and passion for philanthropy has been really unprecedentedly high, although it was dampened in 2011 by the Guomei scandal. The type of variety of philanthropy is also going, and there is a lot of more organized the volunteer work going on. And now, actually, given the limitation of the Chinese charity management, so there are a lot of the charity organizations that are registered under the industry and the commerce as a profit organization. Actually, they are doing more of the non-profit work and also doing the charity work.
Well, of course, that is from the legal perspective as to whether there should be sufficient mechanism established to cater to the needs of these philanthropic organizations. On the other hand, Professor Chambers, we've seen very different generations in China. Some would even argue 7 years in China could be a generation already. And many argue the younger generation in China, they grew up with philanthropic ideas and also with volunteering work. Many would argue that this has already become part of the lifestyle. Having said that, though, they are not yet the backbone of the society. So the question is still, during what format would Chinese philanthropy be able to be demonstrated to not only its domestic constituencies, but also international community? And we notice many Chinese billionaires also would like to contribute their money elsewhere, for example, to university inside the United States for Chinese students who are starting there. Great idea, but what do you think about this so-called priority debate?
Well, I can put it in these terms, going back to the Buffett luncheon. I think that Chinese young people, of course, as they progress, as they accumulate more wealth, as they mature, and then another generation comes, and that builds a middle and professional class that is the backbone of giving, really, in places like the United States. I think, but when you have young people, I don't think that they're going to be attracted to the Buffett luncheon kind of a mechanism. I think that if you have billionaires, I mean, just even as public relations, I think a lot of younger people, doesn't matter whether they're Americans or Chinese, look at some of this as a gimmick, these kind of luncheons. But what they do, what they are pulled to, is when Warren Buffett actually creates the opportunity for them to off time from work or school to volunteer in these organizations, where he can sponsor or fund some of these efforts. And I think there's probably a feeling among Chinese billionaires who are producing this very productive economy to maybe provide those opportunities. It would almost be like scholarships and funding to, say, American universities or Chinese universities, but actually time off maybe for a year or 6 months to actually go into the province, teach children to read, or go on and assist people in terms of health care and things like that. I think that would fire up Chinese youth, and not just Chinese youth who are, maybe in their teens or 20s, but even people maybe in their 30s who can now maybe afford to give a little bit more.
All right, Professor Liu, though, one of the things by doing exclusive interviews with Mr. Bill Gates and also people from the Gates Foundation is the takeaway that it seems philanthropy is not a philanthropy of its own, but rather it depends on so many different kinds of capabilities that one individual or one organization has in dealing with government, business, civil society, in having very clear plans, implementing of these plans, and of course sufficient money for that. But this is such a big scale project. Even Mr. Gates, in an exclusive interview earlier with us, talked about he learned more than any earlier stage of his professional career. But with China still a rising power, not only the government is learning, but also business community is learning about how to deal with the rest of the world and what to do. Will China be able to have the rules like Mr. Buffett or Mr. Gates be able to do something that is as gigantic as their project is, even though the money is there, but the capability? What about that?
I think number one is the ideology. People often quote Andrew Carnegie, a man who, dies rich and dies in disgrace. So, whether we embrace this type of idea, So that's a long culturation process. So
even though you embrace, what about the capabilities? That's what we're
that's
talking
right.
about.
So the other is that I think capability now China can almost rival in terms of the super rich people with that with that of those developed countries. So I think now it's not really the capability; it's really the willingness, the mindset that is there. So actually, also there is also the legal environment that is there, because in the United States you have the inheritance, you also have the giving tax, etc. So by rational calculation, people do it. And the other is really skill. So whether you have the creative skill, because philanthropy demands high skill even than doing business.
Yes, indeed. The skill and the capabilities are the most important thing. It's just not all about money itself. That would be the easy part. Thank you so much, Professor Liu Baocheng and Professor Christopher Chambers. Thank you for being with us, gentlemen.
Thank you.
That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of a program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You'll be able to find us. Or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone at the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again next time for more insight from across China and around the world. Good night.